Hi everyone, welcome to Obesity Cure Clinic. This is Islam. Today I'm going to talk about who else should avoid honey in their diet. In the second episode, I discussed about the diabetic people who should completely, strictly avoid honey in their diet because they are insulin resistant, in which cells are very much insensitive to the signal of insulin, because of which blood glucose cannot enter the cells. Only small amount of blood glucose can enter the cells. So in such a condition, people who are diabetic, they should avoid the foods which are high in sugar, including honey, as honey is high in sugar. 83% of honey is sugar, right? So I suggest you to watch the earlier episodes to understand everything in details. Now, who are the other category of people should avoid honey in their diet? People who are obese. Now, why obese people should avoid honey in their diet? To get the answer of it, we first have to understand what actually obesity is and why someone becomes obese. Now, obesity is actually a disease of hunger. The obese people actually eat too much. Now, this is an incomplete statement. We always say that they eat too much of calories, but we never say this, that what kind of food they eat too much. They eat too much of carbohydrates, and now this is the complete statement. They eat too much of carbohydrates, and carbohydrates make them more hungry, and they end up eating more carbohydrates, and in different forms like whole grains, legumes, fruits, fruit juices, refined carbohydrates. These are worst kind of carbohydrates like biscuits, bhujia, burger, white bread, pizza, buns, pasta, noodles. And apart from that, they also ingest sugary soda drinks, table sugar, chocolates, cakes, sweets, and many more. Now, if you notice, an obese people, most of them were not obese some years back, right? 5-6 years back or 7 years back, they were not obese from their childhood, and actually they became obese at a certain age, in spite of eating the same way, in spite of eating too much of carbohydrates. Why? But what happened over time in their body that they started gaining body fat? Now that is a very key question here. Now, when they eat this way for a long time and too much of carbohydrates, now carbohydrates are digested into monosaccharides, simple sugars, and that increases your blood glucose to a very high extent. Now, in response to that, your body produces insulin to manage all this blood glucose, to dispose all this blood glucose into different cells like muscle cells, cardiac cells, muscle cells, cardiac cells, fat cells. Now the problem is here that when you are providing too much of glucose by eating carbohydrates, and which is more than the requirement of your cells. Now you are providing too much of glucose, which is more than the requirement of the cells. Then as a defense mechanism, what your cells do, cells down-regulate insulin receptors. Now, too much of glucose is actually not healthy for your cells. It can cause a lot of oxidative damage by increasing reactive oxygen species known as free radicals, and that can damage the cells, the DNA of the cells. So this is not good. So as a defense mechanism, what your cells do, it down-regulates insulin receptors. Now, glucose cannot enter some particular cells freely. They need insulin as a key to open the gate. Now insulin, now I have drawn a diagram here to make you understand better. For example, this is insulin. It binds with the receptors, then the blood glucose can enter the cells through some glucose channel. Otherwise, the glucose channels will not open. So when it down regulates, when these receptors are down regulated, then only small amount of blood glucose can enter the cells, right? And when small amount of blood glucose can enter the cells, and you have too much of glucose in the blood, and your body does not like it, your body tries its level best to bring the blood glucose to the normal level. So what it does, it produces, your body, to overcome this insulin resistance, your body produces more insulin so that it can push the glucose into the cells. Right? Now you just can think this way, that you are hiring more workers to do the same amount of work now. So the same way, when you develop insulin resistance, now what is insulin resistance? When your cells down regulate insulin receptors, thus you develop insulin resistance. And when you are insulin resistance, to overcome this insulin resistance, your body produces more insulin to push this blood glucose into the cells. And this is when your blood insulin level is high all the time, and this leads to obesity. This is the root cause of obesity. So when you were lean and thin many years back and you did not have insulin resistance, but because of eating this way for a long time, over time you have developed insulin resistance now, and because of which you always have high insulin level in the blood, a condition called hyperinsulinemia. And when you have high insulin level in the blood, it stimulates an enzyme called ATP citrate-lyase, especially dominantly in the liver. What it does, it converts the blood glucose into fat, a process called de novo lipogenesis. Not only this, high insulin level stimulates another enzyme called lipoprotein lipase in fat cells. So after the blood glucose getting converted to fats, it is stored in the fat cells with the help of lipoprotein lipase, and thus you gain body fat and you become obese. So this is the whole process. This is the biochemistry, and this is how it happens in your body and continuously happening in your body, which is responsible for your obesity. Now what you have to target here is hyperinsulinemia. Now why your body produces more insulin? Because you are insulin resistant, so your body is producing more insulin, and because of eating too much of carbohydrates. So you eat too much of carbohydrates, your body needs to produce insulin, and you are insulin resistant, so your body needs to overcome that resistance, and thus it produces more insulin. So if you reduce it, if you can reduce the amount of carbohydrates, especially the worst kind of foods like fruit juices, refined carbohydrates, biscuits, bhujia, burger, all these, and sugary soda drinks, table sugar, chocolates, if you can reduce it, it will help you. So by this you will not over torture your body. Try to stick with whole grains, legumes, and fruits and vegetables in terms of carbohydrate. Still it should be in moderation, especially the whole grains. Right? So when you are insulin resistant and you are obese and you are eating this way, then adding honey, which is high in sugar, is obviously not a healthy practice. It can promote more fat gain because it can because it will stimulate more insulin release in the body. But a person who is now obese and following a low carbohydrate diet, for example, he is not eating more than 70 grams a day, and obviously he will lose body fat because he is eating very less, and he has started recently eating a low carbohydrate diet. Then adding honey in moderation, maybe 10 to 15 grams a day, will not be problematic for him, so he can add. So you have to understand here the healthy habits of eating. So if you're reducing your total intake of carbohydrates, and if you are bringing it down to 70 grams or 80 grams, or for example you are following a ketogenic diet, then adding honey in moderation may not be problematic, right? So that you have to understand. And another thing that the people who are obese are eating this way, and the people who are diabetic, they can use honey, but in some special conditions. When for example, because honey has strong therapeutic benefits. It has strong antimicrobial properties that can fight bacteria, viruses. So that is why if you contract any infection in your body, maybe stomach infection or your intestinal infection, or maybe you have a wound, so you can use at that time. So it should be conditional. It can be used conditionally as it has strong antimicrobial properties, but that does not justify consuming honey on a regular basis at all. And the persons who are lean and thin, still they are not insulin resistant and they are genetically gifted, then they can use honey as per their taste. They should not erroneously believe or think that honey is very nutritious. It has lot of nutrients. It really provides insignificant amount of essential nutrients with high amount of sugar. So just for the taste they can use it, right? So that was all for this episode, and I will come with the next episode where I will talk about the people, the people who are having fatty liver, and why the people who are diagnosed with fatty liver, they should completely avoid honey, as honey contains a particular type of sugar, simple sugar called fructose, and fructose actually can be far more damaging than the glucose. I will talk in details in the next episode about that. So thank you so much for watching.